Welcome back to another video, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Ellie. It's super warm in the UK today and my flat is boiling, so sorry if I look a little bit warm, and I have got the window open, so sorry if you hear any cars going past, just because I live on a really busy road. But for today's video, I'm going to be talking through how I lino print on a tote bag, and I also wanted to talk through everything I use. I will leave everything linked down below in case you want to find anything. So the first thing that I'm going to be using is the Speedball Speedy Carve stamp rubber. This is my favourite stamp rubber for printing on fabric. I found it works the best for me, and it's super easy to carve as well. It's really good for if you are just starting out. So I'm going to be carving my design on this today, and then to carve my design I'm going to be using the file tools. I have set C of the file tools. I'm not exactly sure which ones they are, but I will leave them linked down below. So I'm going to be using the file tools to carve out my design. These are my favourite tools. I know some people like the FlexiCut ones, but these are just my personal preference. Then the ink that I'm going to be using is the Speedball block printing fabric ink, and I'm going to be using it in 3 different colours because I want to create a gradient. So I'm going to be talking through how I do that as well. So I'm going to be using blue, and then I'm also going to be using opaque white and turquoise, and I picked all of these up from Hand Printed UK. I find that this is definitely the best ink for printing on a tote bag because tote bags are kind of a thicker material, so you need a really high coverage ink. The next thing that I'm going to be using is my fabric printing roller. I picked this up from Hand Printed UK as well, and it's just the SD fabric printing roller, and it's super spongy, so it picks up loads of ink. As you can see, mine's a bit like dirty because they are really difficult to clean because they just pick up so much ink. So it's really spongy, so it picks up more ink, so you can get a thicker coat of ink on your stamp. I really recommend one of these. I really like this. I think it works super well, especially for printing on tote bags and a thicker fabric. So I'm going to be using this as well. And then I am also going to be using a piece of Perspex acrylic to roll the ink out onto. I'm also going to be using a Baron to apply pressure onto my stamp rubber to transfer the design onto the fabric. I find a Baron works best, but you can always use a roller as well. They both work fine. I just find a Baron works a little bit better to ensure that your stamp rubber doesn't slip or move around. And then the final thing that I'm going to be using is a tote bag. I just have this spare tote bag, so I thought I would just print on this one. It's made of organic cotton, and I can't quite remember where I got it from, but any tote bag would be fine. So this is just one that I'm going to be using today. I had already drawn my design onto the stamp rubber using a pencil, and then I just gone over it in pen to make sure that I could clearly see where I was going to carve. Then I went in with a V-shaped file tool just to carve around the edges of my design. I like to do this to create a deep cut so that when I'm carving away the background I know exactly where my design is, and the edges of the design have really clean lines. Then using a U-shaped tool I went ahead and started carving around some of the dots and carving away the background. I like to use a slightly bigger tool to carve away the background just because I find it makes it so much quicker than using a really tiny tool. So I just used 2 of my U-shaped file tools just to carve out the background. I always find that it's really useful to carve around the outline of the design first, and I also carved around the outline of the dots. Then I carved away the background. I find that this works best for me rather than just carving the background out straight away. I just like to make sure that there's a nice clean edge around my design, and in this case around the dots as well, because then it's super easy to see where you are carving away the background. This block did take me quite a long time to carve because there was a lot of background carving, but obviously I condensed it for this video. It's really important to take your time when you're carving so that you don't slice through your design or hurt yourself or anything. So this design took me in total probably about 3 or 4 hours to finish. It was slow progress carving away all of the background. So once I've finished carving the design, I'm going to roll out my ink on a piece of Perspex acrylic, and for this particular print I wanted to do a gradient, so I'm going to talk through how I do that. For this I'm using 3 colours. I'm using turquoise, blue and white. So I just pop the turquoise at the top, and then I'm going to put a little bit of opaque white in the middle. This just helps to blend the colours. I found that this works really well for me, just to help blend the colours together. I didn't have any white on my design, but I did want to use a bit of white just to help the colours blend together in the middle. So I put my inks out, all 3 of them, in like a stripe on the piece of Perspex acrylic, and then I take my roller and I just roll them out. It's really important that you roll like one way and you don't switch up, because otherwise you're going to mix all of the colours together. So as you can see, I'm just rolling horizontally, and I'm not going to switch and roll vertically because that will mix all of the colours up. So it does take quite a while to roll out the ink, and here you can see I'm adding little bits of extra ink. I like to use a really thick coat of ink while I'm fabric printing, so I always add extra ink while I'm rolling it out just to make sure that I have enough, because I find a really thick coat of ink works better and it gets a more even print on the fabric, particularly if you have a really textured fabric, which I do today. My fabric is pretty textured. As you can see while I'm rolling, there is no white, but the white really helps the colours to mix together. So white isn't part of my gradient, but it has really helped the colours mix together. Then I'm going to go ahead and roll the ink onto the stamp rubber, trying to keep the gradient and not mix the colours too much. As you can see, my roller isn't big enough for the stamp, so I just go over the stamp with the edge of the roller that has the right colour on, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of difficult to explain, but I think you will see from the video. Hopefully it's a little bit clearer. So I'm just using the same colour, like I've just flipped the stamp so that I can get the same colour, so all the colours match and everything, and I'm not mixing all of the colours together. Now I'm just going to go ahead and do a test print on a piece of paper. This is just to check that my design looks how I want it to, and to check that I've carved away all of the stamp rubber and I haven't missed any bits. I always like to do a test print on paper before I print on fabric, just because once you've printed on the fabric you can't get it off if anything's wrong with your design, so I just like to do a test print on a piece of paper first. So from my print on the paper you can see there wasn't a very even coverage of ink, so now I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more ink before I print on the fabric and make sure I've got a really thick coat of ink before printing on the fabric. When I'm reapplying the ink, I place the colours in the same places that they were in the first place. This means that I won't mix up any colours in my gradient, and my gradient will look the same. I have placed a tea towel inside of the tote bag. This just makes the surface a little bit softer, and I find it helps with printing because you can apply more pressure when you press with the Baron, and the stamp rubber kind of moulds more into the fabric, I find, and also it stops the ink from going through onto the inside of the bag. It doesn't normally, but I like to just put a tea towel there just in case. Once I've reapplied the ink onto my stamp rubber, I'm then going to take it and place it face down on the tote bag. Once I've placed my stamp rubber on the tote bag, I'm then going to go ahead and apply pressure using the Baron. I like to stamp the Baron all over the piece of stamp rubber just to apply pressure to every single bit, and then I go over with my hands applying more pressure just to make sure that I've got an even print. It's always good to take your time when applying pressure and make sure that you have applied even pressure, otherwise your print won't be even. Then I'm just going to go ahead and remove the piece of stamp rubber. So I've just finished printing and I wanted to show you the final result because I'm really pleased with it. So this is the finished tote bag. I think that it looks really good. I'm really pleased with the print. It printed super evenly. I'll show you a bit closer in a sec, but I'm really pleased with it, and I think the gradient looks really good as well. So this is a close-up of the print, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I didn't think it would print so well because this is a really textured fabric and normally it doesn't pick up the ink as well. Normally it would look more like this but everywhere. So I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Obviously there are some little bits where it's maybe smudged, but I also think the gradient looks really good and that worked really well too. You can see that it really helped where I added the little bit of white ink just to help blend the colours together. And yeah, I'm really pleased with it overall. I think it looks really good. So that is it for this video. I hope it was helpful. Please let me know if you think I missed anything out, or if you found something that works really well for you in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it as always, and I will see you in the next video.